Okay, let's dive back in. We're continuing our deep exploration into one of the most foundational doctrines and honestly, maybe one of the most, well, head-scratching ones in Christian faith.
Yeah, definitely head scratching at times. And our goal isn't just, definitions. We want to really unpack what these sources show us about God's nature. Today, focusing on the distinct ways the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit relate to the world, particularly in creation and salvation.
Okay, so let's do a quick refresh. Based on what we've covered and what these sources reiterate, God eternally exists as three persons, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Each person is fully God, sharing that same divine nature, but there's only one God.
Exactly. That idea of triunity or three-in-oneness, that's what the term Trinity tries to capture, even though, as the sources point out, the word itself isn't, actually in the Bible.
Right, it's a summary term.
Yeah, exactly. And understanding this, the material really stresses, is critical for knowing, what God is like in himself.
Got it. One God, three persons, each fully God. Now, the sources, they highlight a really helpful distinction pretty early on to help us wrap our minds around this. The difference between being and person. What's the core idea there?
This is, foundational in the material we're looking at. Being refers to what something is, its fundamental existence, its substance.
Okay.
Think of God identifying himself to Moses in Exodus 3.14 as I am. The sources even mention the Septuagint, the Old Greek translation renders it, I am the being. It's about the isness, the essence.
Okay, so being is the shared divine stuff, the what. But person is about who God is within that shared being.
Precisely. The sources quote Michael Burgos, who says, basically, within theology, person doesn't automatically means someone with a physical body.
Right.
Rather, person refers to an identity and a set of characteristics unique compared to, non-persons.
So things like having a mind, thinking, choosing, logic and moral agency, self-awareness, the ability to relate, express emotions.
Exactly. And the sources connect this directly to Genesis 1.27, where it says, we are made in God's image. The logic is, because we, made in his image, are personal beings, it strongly suggests God himself must be personal.
Makes sense. If the image is personal, the original must be too.
Right. And another source quoted, Gerald Bray, points out that this concept of person helps describe different relationships. You've got the relationships within the Godhead itself, then between human beings, and then between God and humans.
Okay.
All linked by personhood, but obviously expressed differently.
So we keep coming back to this. One God, three persons, each fully God. But then the big question the sources tackle is, okay, if each person is fully God, sharing all the divine attributes like infinite power, knowledge, wisdom, being eternal, how are they distinct? Because the sources are super clear. It's wrong to say one person existed before another or is stronger or smarter. That would deny they are fully God.
Right. Absolutely. That would undermine the whole doctrine. And this is where the material gives us its main insight for today. The distinctions between Father, Son, and Spirit aren't in their essential being or attributes. They share those fully.
Okay.
The distinctions lie primarily in their functions or their main activities and how they relate to the world and to salvation. Think of it like distinct roles they play in God's work outside of himself.
Ah, okay. Functional differences.
Yeah.
That helps frame it. So how do we see these distinct, let's call them jobs, showing up? This sources start with creation. How do Father, Son, and Spirit appear there?
Well, if you look at Genesis 1, starting around verse 3, who's doing the speaking, and God said, the Father is presented in these sources as the one issuing the decree, speaking the creative words.
The Father speaks the command. Okay. What about the Son?
Here, the sources lean heavily on John 1.3. It tells us it was the eternal Word who is the Son through whom all things were made.
Through him.
Yeah, all things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. Colossians 1.16 is something similar. All things created by him, through him, and for him. So the Father speaks the word, you could say, and the Son is the active agent carrying out that creative decree.
The Son executes the Father's creative word.
Got it.
And the Holy Spirit. Where's the Spirit in Genesis 1?
Genesis 1.1-2 mentions the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Now, the sources we're looking at interpret this not just as passive presence, but as active involvement.
Hovering sounds active, yeah.
Right, like sustaining God's immediate presence, maybe shaping the chaos into a world fit for life, organizing, animating, infusing creation with life and potential. That's the picture they draw.
That's way more than just, being there. It sounds like the Spirit is the one bringing life and order and structure from the potential the Father decreed and the Son enacted.
Exactly. And the sources point out this life-giving role isn't just a one-off in Genesis. Job 33.4 connects our very breath, human life, to the Spirit's power. Psalm 104.30 shows this ongoing role, renewing the earth, bringing life to creatures. It feels very intimate and continuous.
So even in creation, we see these distinct roles lining up. Father initiates with the word, Son carries it out, Spirit perfects, animates, brings life. That pattern seems pretty clear from these sources.
It really does. And the sources argue this pattern of distinct yet unified functional roles becomes even clearer when we look at the work of redemption, of salvation. The New Testament, they argue, consistently presents it this way. Redemption was planned by the Father, it was executed or accomplished by the Son, and it's applied by the Holy Spirit.
Planned by the Father. Where do the sources point for that?
They reference passages like Romans 8, verses 28-29, talking about God's eternal purpose and foreknowledge, and Ephesians 1, especially verses 3-5.
Ephesians 1, right.
Yeah, that one's pretty explicit. It says, the Father chose us in him before the foundation of the world and predestined us for adoption.
Okay, so when the sources talk about foreknowledge and predestination and the Father planning, are they suggesting the Father specifically did the choosing before time?
That's the strong emphasis in this material, yes.
Yeah.
They argue that this planning, this counsel of his will from Ephesians 1.11, this act of electing a people, that was the Father's particular work within the Godhead.
So not the Son or Spirit doing the electing independently.
No, according to these sources, that was the Father's distinct role, initiating the plan, and then having planned it, the Father sent the Son to carry it out.
Sent the Son. Where's that sending action highlighted?
John 3.16 and 17 are prime examples. God the Father so loved the world that he gave his only Son, and verse 17, God did not send his Son, but that the world might be saved through him.
Okay.
And John 6.37-40 has Jesus himself saying, he came not to do his own will, but the will of him who sent me. And he identifies the Father as the sender.
And the sources mention this idea of being sent points to the Son already existing before coming to earth, right? Yeah. Not just a man who appeared.
Exactly. It implies his pre-existence as the eternal Son. Galatians 4.4-6 also says, God sent forth his Son. And then, interestingly, verse 6 adds that God has sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts.
So the Father sends both.
Yeah, presented as the sender of both the Son and the Spirit into the world, according to his plan.
Okay, so the plan starts with the Father, who then sends the Son. That brings us to the execution part.
Yes. Redemption executed or accomplished by the Son. Hebrews 10, verses 5-10, shows Christ coming into the world, saying essentially, I've come to do your will, O God, meaning the Father's will, and doing that by offering his body.
Right, the sacrifice.
And Ephesians 1.7 talks about our redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of our trespasses. It's tied directly to the Son's action.
And the sources really hammered this point home, didn't they? That it was specifically the Son who died for sins. Not the Father, not the Spirit. That was his unique role.
Absolutely crucial distinction, they argue. And they also emphasize the Son's willingness. It wasn't like he was forced. Ephesians 5.25-27 says, Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her.
So the Son embraced the Father's plan.
Willingly, yes. Set his affection on the people the Father chose and came to purchase them, redeem them with his own life.
Okay. Father plans and sends. Son executes through his death and resurrection. That leaves the third part, application.
And that, according to these sources, is the specific work of the Holy Spirit. After the Son returned to heaven, the Spirit was sent by both the Father and the Son, actually to apply the redemption the Son purchased, to bring it home to individual believers. That's his primary functional role. Application.
Application. What does that actually look like, practically speaking, based on the sources?
Well, first, giving us new spiritual life. Regeneration, being born again. John 3, verses 5 to 8, talks about being born of the Spirit. He says, what is born of the Spirit is spirit. The Spirit gives us the capacity to even respond to God.
Okay, new birth. What about growing, becoming more like Christ, sanctification?
Also, the Spirit's work. Romans 8.13:16 talks about putting sin to death by the Spirit and being led by the Spirit of God. And the sources make a special point about Galatians 5.22:22-33.
It's fruit of the Spirit.
Exactly. Love, joy, peace, patience, all that. The sources highlight that it's called the fruit of the Spirit, showing his unique work in changing our character. We don't read about fruit of the Father or fruit of the Son described quite like that.
That's a really clear example of that functional distinction. The fruit we see is the Spirit's specific work in us.
Right. And he also equips and empowers us for service. Acts 1.8, you will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, so you can be witnesses. 1 Corinthians 12 talks about the gifts of the Spirit, wisdom, knowledge, faith, healing, distributed as he wills. Again, gifts of the Spirit pointing to his distinct role.
So summing up the Spirit's role, he takes what the Father planned and the Son achieved and makes it real in us and through us. He completes the work internally.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's this beautifully interconnected Trinitarian work. Peter actually summarizes it nicely in 1 Peter 1, verses 1 and 2. He mentions believers are chosen according to the foreknowledge of God the Father, set apart by the sanctification of the Spirit, which leads to obedience to Jesus Christ and cleansing by his blood.
Wow. Yeah, all three right there. Father's foreknowledge, Spirit's sanctifying work, Son's blood. It's a total package deal.
It really is. Laying it out like that, planned by the Father, executed by the Son, applied by the Spirit, it really does clarify how these distinct persons work together in this huge story of salvation.
It shows salvation isn't just about Jesus isolated. It's inherently Trinitarian.
Completely. The material quotes Chris Bruno on this, saying something like, if we separate what Christ accomplishes from what the Father and the Holy Spirit have done, then we will quickly find ourselves on shaky ground.
Yeah, you lose the foundation. And the sources argue that losing sight of the whole team, so to speak, means drifting away from the whole Bible's witness to the glory of our salvation. Without all three working together, there's really no good news.
In Ephesians 1, those verses 3 to 14, the material calls that a glorious description of exactly this. You see the Father planning, choosing, predestining. You see the Son purchasing redemption through his blood. And you see the Holy Spirit preserving, sealed with the promised Holy Spirit, the guarantee.
Looking at that passage again through this lens, Father's plan, Son's purchase, Spirit sealing it, it really transforms it. It's not just a list of nice things God did. It's this incredible picture of the entire Godhead, laser focused, working together specifically for you.
Absolutely. And the sources wrap up by quoting Bruno again, highlighting the result of seeing this clearly. Our confidence and joy in God deepens. It leads to a childlike trust.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Because realizing that the triune God, the one who made and holds everything together, is, as the source says, entirely committed to your salvation and eternal good through these distinct cooperative roles.
Yeah.
Wow. That's incredibly reassuring and must deeply impact how you view God and his involvement in your life.
It absolutely should. It changes your whole perspective on his relationship with you.
So just to recap the main takeaway from these sources on the distinctions within the Trinity, it's not about differences in their divine being or power. They share that fully. It's about their distinct roles, their functions in the work they do outside of themselves, especially in creating the world and saving us. The Father plans, initiates, sends. The Son executes, accomplishes the work. The Spirit applies it, completes it, makes it real for us.
And in that whole amazing process, Father planning, Son accomplishing, Spirit applying the material, really underscores that God is giving us nothing less than his own self. All three persons involved in giving us God.
That is a profound thought to just sit with. So maybe the thing to leave you thinking about is this. Considering this unified yet distinct action of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit throughout history, especially in salvation, what does this incredibly detailed, dynamic picture of God's relationship with the world, and specifically with you, truly reveal about his fundamental nature and his absolute, unwavering commitment